As I rewatched the first two series of Doctor Who, I realised this would be a perfect opportunity to delve into a side of the story world I'd previously not explored, the Torchwood series. Before this rewatch, I hadn't seen the first two series of Torchwood, so I thought I'd give them a go in order to complete my viewing of New Who in its entirety. But honestly, I'm not sure I liked it all that much. Watching it through, I'm not entirely sure who it's for. I recall seeing it advertised as Doctor Who for adults, but the only elements that make this show more for adults are surface level and generally pretty crass. Some of the better episodes do touch on interesting and more mature themes, but it never feels like the show has anything meaningful to say about them. And in that regard, I think Doctor Who does a much better job at not only developing and exploring interesting and occasionally mature concepts, but making that exploration accessible to a mass audience. I think part of the reason for that is the characters. With Doctor Who, you always have the character of the Doctor and whoever their companions are at a given time, and those characters are always the moral backbone of the show. They are always willing to stand up against injustices wherever they find them, and so some of the more interesting episodes are the ones that challenge that and put the Doctor and their companions in situations where it's more difficult to do that. With Torchwood, you have a set of characters who are much more morally grey, and in my opinion, much more difficult therefore to latch onto and to understand where they're coming from. That's not to say I don't like morally ambiguous characters, because some of the best characters in all of fiction fall into that category, but in this context, in a show spun off from Doctor Who, I'm not convinced it works. The characters' flippancy and occasional lack of regard for the greater good in favour of their own personal interests seems somewhat contradictory to the ethos Doctor Who stands for. And as I say, some of the best episodes of the main show have done just that, contradicted what the series usually stands for, but there's always a consequence, and it's not every episode and every character. In Torchwood, even the protagonist, Gwen, who initially appeared to be the moral centre of the team, is guilty of morally questionable decisions frequently in the show. Now this makes her a more interesting character, granted, but it also makes it much harder for me to invest in the team when every single one of them, including the protagonist, an assumed moral centre, is like this. Of that, the one choice I found really bizarre in the show was the characterisation of Captain Jack. He seems nothing like his portrayal in the first series of Doctor Who, with the writers instead opting to present him as this mysterious dark figure. For the main show, especially in the first series, this absolutely worked for the Doctor because we knew nothing about him. Even for viewers of the classic series, the newly added backstory of the Time War gave him a mysterious past. Since the show is viewed through the lens of Rose, we discover more about him as a character as she does. There is an argument to be made that since Torchwood is viewed through the lens of Gwen, we similarly discover more about Captain Jack as she does throughout the show. But there are two issues with this argument. The first is that we're assuming that, unlike the main show which brought in a whole new generation of fans and needed to reintroduce the key elements of the series to modern audiences, the vast majority of Torchwood viewers will have already watched Doctor Who, and so will be familiar with Captain Jack already. The second is, we don't actually learn that much about Captain Jack over the course of the show, and Gwen never really gets her questions about his past answered. Which to me seems bizarre considering how much of an open book he was in Doctor Who. Of course, he still had an air of mystery about him, but once he joined the TARDIS team, it never felt as though he deliberately withheld information from the others. He was fun and easygoing, the opposite of his characterisation in Torchwood. By representing all the characters in the ensemble as morally grey, usually mysterious figures, I found it difficult for any of them to resonate with me. And as discussed, the show's almost flippant handling of some darker and more mature themes, coupled with its insistence of frequent depictions of sex and sexuality, make it seem less like an adult version of Doctor Who, and more like it's trying to be edgy for edginess' sake. As I say, I'm not really sure who it's for, and critically, how it expands and enriches the world of Doctor Who. Which is a shame because from memory, Children of Earth was fantastic, and I'm still looking forward to getting around to it in my rewatch, but the first series of the show certainly leaves a lot to be desired. I'm curious what you all think of Torchwood. Do you agree, or do you find it to be successful in portraying more mature themes in the story world of Doctor Who? I'm interested to see what it does in the second series, but to be honest, so far I'm unimpressed, and more looking forward to getting back to the main show. If you've liked this video, please consider subscribing for more, but until next time, thanks.